Hello, it's Dabdo and welcome to my tiny channel. So in this video I wanted to talk briefly about my medical journey, and thank you to Joy, who commented on the other video and had asked whether I could share that. That was very nice of you to leave a comment there, and so I will. Basically, I think that the way that I think that this video can be most useful is to give you a bit of an expectation about what it's like to be a medical student or get into medical school to start off with, and then finally what it's actually like to be a doctor on the other end, because that journey is quite a long one and there's lots of differences along the way of that journey. So starting with the motivation of why I wanted to go into medical school and become a doctor in the first place, it's kind of that cliche of I wanted to help people. In fact, I didn't always want to become a doctor. When I was younger, my dad was a GP in the country, and I saw that he worked super duper hard. And when I was a kid, I was like, I don't want to work that hard. That's crazy. Now, obviously, being finding enough training as a GP now, I have a lot of respect for the stuff that he does. But then all I saw was that he was working really, really hard, and like originally, I didn't want that. That said, there was a time in high school, around 16 or 17 years old, where I thought, well, I kind of want to do something meaningful with my life. Like, you know, if I were to die tomorrow or die next year sort of thing, like, what is something that I could do where I could feel happy with my life and not feel any regrets? And so what I ended up thinking was, well, like, I feel happy when I think I can make other people happy. And with that concept in mind, I was like, okay, well, I think that medicine seems like probably a good idea. Then I luckily had a work experience rotation, because in high school they made you go to like the workplace that you wanted to work at, sort of thing, and hang around with people that are actually doing the job. And so I just happened to come across this young group of really, really cool doctors, people like Mary, Michael, and like a lot of people. And basically, like, they were really like warm and like kind and funny, and I was just like, I want to be like these guys. These guys are so cool. So from that point onwards, with the combination of wanting to help people and being like, wow, these guys are so cool, I was like, yeah, I think I want to be a doctor. So in high school, year 11 and year 12, I worked extremely hard for back then. In fact, I probably haven't worked nearly as hard ever since then. But during that time, like, I would often stay in the boarding school library room, and it was open to the courtyard, and often the teachers would see me in there and be like, David, it's like 11 p.m. you need to go to bed now because this is like way too late. And I'm like, no, I just want to study like a little bit more. So I did have the goal to get a score of 99.5 for my ATAR, which was the sort of high school score, and that would indicate, like, you know, top 0.5% of the state, and I managed to get that, I was happy with that. I got 99.55, and I was like, yoo-hoo! Like, you know, all this hard work wasn't for nothing. And I also did, like, back then there was this test called the UMAT. I think they call it UCAT or something else now, that you have to do before you actually get into medical school. It's like an additional one. And so I did a prep course for that and worked hard at that too, and did well enough to get into med school. So anyway, coming into med school itself, what med school was like, first of all, the most interesting thing is that when you're someone, let's say that you're like one of the smartest in the class now, when you get to med school, it's like a whole bunch of people, and they all were like the smartest people of their class, sort of things. So you really, like, if you thought that you were doing good at like intellectual stuff before, when you come to meet all these people, like, you certainly gain a lot of humility, because these guys, you know, people that end up becoming my friends, are all really, really smart. So the stuff that we sort of did was we would do like lectures and tutorials, and they would teach us things about like how to take histories from patients. They would teach us basic biological concepts to medicine concepts, how to actually ask questions of patients, because you'll find that the history and the examination is the most important part of being able to diagnose and help people from a medical point of view. And they would teach us all about, like, you know, how the different parts of the body interact by physiology, what the different parts of the body are by anatomy, and there's experiences like, for example, dissecting people's bodies, like people that have volunteered their bodies, obviously. Otherwise the contrary would be a bit creepy. But so, like, you know, there's a lot of like initial experiences of medicine that are taught in those early days of university, and they sort of do set you up for later years down the track. So yeah, lectures, tutorials, and I used to be in college, and that was super fun because then I would do stuff like play table tennis with my friends, or, you know, go for parties, etc., etc. In fact, I would host a few parties because I was the social representative at the time. That was the task that was set to me. I had a party once with only 2 or 3 people because people eventually stopped wanting to go to parties and actually just wanted to study more so. But there was a lot of work even in medical school, and, you know, you are genuinely putting in quite a few hours of homework each day, even after the actual lectures and stuff like that. But if you're doing it with friends and stuff, then that journey feels like a lot more fun. If you're sort of doing it solitary, going home every day and just studying, I think that would be, unless you're like that sort of thing, but for me, I feel like that would be a bit of a lonely experience, whereas I would always try to like make it more fun by studying with friends and other friends in the library who are also on this journey. And so when you have that shared journey with people, you sort of have that camaraderie, and often people find, and certainly I found, that the friends that I made in university were the friends that I kept for life. So I'm really happy that I got to meet all those people and meet people that really are like more similar to you. Because if you're in a stage where like some people around you are a bit lazy, or some people around you don't quite have the same values, some people just like desire different things in life, you'll find that you'll find a lot of cool people in medical school, or at least I found that. Anyway, I've been rambling on that bit for a while. So the university part, that was 2 years at the Monash University degree. And then afterwards, you would do clinical years. So this is where you've now been thoroughly prepped up on some theoretical knowledge type stuff, and you're thrown into hospitals essentially. And during those times, you're now shadowing other doctors and getting tutorials from other doctors and getting grilled by them in terms of asking, how do you do this examination, or how do you do this history, etc., etc. You go to different wards. Some wards are more intense than others. Some teachers are more intense than others, and some teachers are good or bad. So those particular times, I personally found they were more tricky than the years before, and a lot of people found it easier, but I found it a bit trickier. You're learning medical conditions and stuff at the time, but the structure is a little bit less there. Like, you really have to be a bit more proactive in terms of how you learn things, because now you're not just doing things from a textbook, but you're seeing actual patients. And so if you want to learn about those patients, really you have to make some time to go and talk to people with particular medical conditions and stuff. And often that experience would look like, you know, you'd be asking the doctors on the ward, like, is there any good patients that I can talk to about this particular medical condition? And they'd be like, oh man, like, not today. Or whatever. Or like some doctors would be like, like, I don't think we have anyone for the moment, because, you know, either they're like too complex or they're not very nice to talk to. one of those two things. But you would get sometimes where it's like, well, look, this patient, you know, they seem like a good patient, they're a good person to talk to. So in those first years of clinical years, you're really trying to brush up, or rather you're trying to learn from scratch those skills about dealing with other humans in real life, because you do have a sort of framework that you get taught in your preclinical years, but in actual clinical practice, just talking to people is a lot different. So you'll find that when talking to patients for the first time, it feels really awkward. And one of the things, an example of this is that you never feel as if you can interrupt what they're saying, because sometimes, you know, if you haven't done medicine stuff before, you haven't even done like other stuff that might have to do with communication before, when you're listening to someone talk about their story, they can go on for a very, very, very long time. Some people can just go for like infinity number of paragraphs before, and it's fine because you probably want to hear their story, but you learn communication skills like being able to interject at the right times, or being able to capitalize on that small pause at the end of their sentence, so that you can actually like insert a question about the medical condition that you're wondering about, or the medical symptom that you're wondering about. So a lot of that initial clinical years, and even later clinical years, really is about examining patients, taking histories from them, and just trying to learn as much as you can from them. It's one of the reasons that I talk about stuff like the clinical Zettelkasten in the other Notion video and stuff, because the type of learning that you get from this a lot less structured. Fundamentally, the hard part about that aspect of things is that if you're someone like me, like, you know, the pressure of getting asked a question or from someone else, like a senior doctor or whatever, and then having them like give feedback to you, like that's a pretty high pressure compared to being in a classroom and that sort of thing, and just like or even being in a situation where, you know, the patient's not in front of you. So that you don't really have much responsibility as a medical student. Sometimes you might get tasked with like a little bit, but you know, you won't be put into a position where it could actually be dangerous for someone, because medical students are kind of protected a bit like that. Throughout this whole time, you're still working really hard and still studying every day. So then fast forward to graduation, yay fun, and you go into internship for the first time, which is the first year that you're ever actually a doctor. Like, you've got the badge of I'm a doctor, and now you've got the responsibility of I'm a doctor, so that badge is very, very weighty. With regards to that, I think that medical students, especially in their last year of medical school, have a lot of fear towards that particular year. And that fear is very, very reasonable, because like, by the time you finish medical school, you know a lot of stuff. It's just about how you apply it to real life that is the big transition point of that year. Because you'll find that in the end, there's a lot of stuff in medical school that, you know, recalling it doesn't really matter, but there's a lot of stuff that you just have to learn on the go, and you realize really that that responsibility can lead to a high pressure, because you've got the responsibility of a lot of different things at once. You've got the responsibility of trying to manage your time properly and trying to learn things, especially because you won't know, or at least you hopefully you have the humility to realize you won't know too much when you're at that stage. You have the responsibility of genuinely like identifying when things are dangerous for people, when people are having heart attacks, and what to do about those to a little degree. At the very least, like, you'd want to figure out stuff like, do I need to talk to another senior doctor about this? And so the first year of being a doctor is about that difference in expectation. In Australia, I think internship is pretty good. So generally speaking, at least I hope so, but generally speaking, like, the registrars and residents will try to be nice to the interns, because we know that that people are learning things for the first time, and there's always a first time for everything, right? And everyone went through it as well. So, you know, I think anyone that's gone through that can understand the struggles of what it was like to be an intern, to sort of be uncomfortable with doing certain things, or having a bit of fear, like referring to other people and, you know, talking to specialists on the phone and that sort of thing, or, you know, entering emergency situations. And yeah, so that's a sort of the first year of internship here. I can certainly talk a lot more about that, but that's a brief recap of what that's like. You do rotations. So in medical school, like your first clinical years, you'll do rotations in medical things and surgical things. You get to spend a bit of time in theatre. So if you're interested in surgery, or rather, you should keep an open mind and go to theatre and see if you're interested in some of the surgical stuff. You'll get exposure to pediatrics, to women's health, and most of that will be done on the wards. You also get a little bit of time spent in general practice and observing people there. So when you come to internship, it's mostly like hospital type stuff instead. You're really going through general medicine, general surgery, emergency medicine, and then the rest is sort of whatever the rest is. So that would totally depend on the luck of the draw and the hospital rotations at the time. So each of those individual wards has different levels of intensity and different styles of how you would approach different situations. So there's this concept of inpatients and outpatients. So inpatients is taking care of people that are physically in the hospital, and then outpatients is trying to take care of people like in a clinic, for example. They come and drive to your clinic, and then they just see you in your room, and then after they've talked to you about whatever problem is they have, then they go back home and do whatever. So when you're an intern and a resident, which is like second year and third year beyond, then most of the stuff that you're doing is inpatient kind of stuff. The next stage after that, after residency, is that most people will become a registrar of some kind, or want to start specializing in something. So there's a few different streams that this leads into. There's the medical stream, and so even though this whole thing is called medicine, but medical in that perspective actually talks more about, so if you're interested in things like cardiology, or interested in rheumatology, endocrinology, like nephrology, basically think of it as just like brainy intellectual stuff as a simple thing, but it's just like stuff that isn't surgery. For example, surgery of course has a lot to do with physical handling and physically like cutting things up, or doing procedures to help people like that, like physical procedures, or doing joint replacements if you're in orthopedics, etc. But it's just like it's a completely different knowledge set from this medical / physician's side, and then this surgical, which is the surgical side. So they just manage different conditions. And surgery, for example, if you're wanting to do heart surgery, that's different from cardiology. So cardiology will be things like dealing with people's heart attacks or funny heart rhythms. Sometimes it might involve interventional type stuff, like putting in a stent into someone's artery, but that's further down the track as well. For simplistic purposes, if you think of medicine, surgery as two different streams, that's probably a good place to start. Emergency is something by itself. So if you're interested in emergency conditions, that's something that you can choose to specialize in and become a registrar in / consultant into. A lot of people, when they think of hospitals, think of intensive care units, and so that's the sort of area where they've got one-to-one nursing, they've got people that are on ventilators and people that are really sick. They go to the intensive care unit, and so that's an area you can specialize in. You can specialize in anesthetics, for example, if you're wanting to like anesthetics is one of those ones where I think you'd have to have a keen eye on physiology and that sort of thing, and how the machine of the human body works. But for what I wanted to do, I actually decided that I wanted to do general practice. So general practice is something that's not, well, obviously it's not in hospitals. It's actually something that you go out into the community, and you are a GP at a clinic sort of thing. So, almost by definition, they're outpatients. Everyone is an outpatient. Everyone is someone that's just seeing you in the clinic and then going home. But sometimes then they see you in the clinic and you find out they're really sick and you're like, well, I think you better go to hospital. So that's that. But general practice is the one that I'm training for at the moment. I personally think that general practice is the best because the people in general practice seem to be really, really happy, and I want to be happy too. But that focuses a lot on family medicine and like a very well-rounded view of patients and that sort of thing. I mean, ideally, like, doctors in other specialties have a well-rounded view too, but I think that in general practice especially, that's really, really important to understand, like, the context of that patient's life and really get to know that patient as a person. Those are sorts of things that are emphasized in general practice. That's something that I personally felt like was a really good thing to want to do, because I always felt that one of the funnest parts of being a doctor is just being able to get to talk to people and get to actually know people properly, and being able to understand what people are really thinking and feeling. So yeah, that's why I chose to do that. But anyway, so what would I want to know if I was before medical school or even in medical school that would be helpful? Well, first of all, the first question that you need to ask yourself is this kind of thing for you? The reality of something like medical school is that it is very hard. Like, you do have to work genuinely quite hard and quite intensely for quite a few years before you get to a point where, like, even now I feel like there's a lot of people that are specializing in different things or specializing in surgery, and a lot of my friends are doing that, and they're still working almost just as hard as they did even back in high school, even back at the starting years of medical school. The intensity never really eases off. So if you're someone that if you're someone that's doing something like general practice or something like that, the intensity does ease off, comparatively speaking. I would say it's not because of anything apart from, like, the hours are just a little bit different and the emphasis is a bit different too. But I think that that the intensity, even for general practitioners, or at least good general practitioners, is still there to a big degree. So if you're someone that likes to have a relaxed lifestyle, but you don't want to wait for that to come, like, I don't think that medicine is a really good idea, because I feel like it's always kind of intense. Of course, like, that's not to virtue signal or anything like that and be like, ooh, like, it's so hard to be a doctor or anything. It's more so just that I think that it's important to have a realistic understanding that it's not easy. And I think that if you're not really interested in it, then it would be very easy to drop off from medical school. And in fact, if you do find in the first 1 or 2 years, this thing is really not for me, I think that you have to be careful not to fall into that sunk cost fallacy of thinking, like, I've already spent 1 year or so, and I might as well just keep going. Like, some people do think that, and then they get stuck, and then 5 years later they're like, I really, really hate this, and 5 years ago I hated this, and now I hate this even more 5 years later. I think in those particular circumstances, don't worry about the stuff that's gone before, because you have the whole rest of your life to think and find what you want to do. So even if medicine, you find out it's not for you, there's a lot of other things that you might find even more enjoyable. And at least, even having gone through that process, you'll realize, well, like, I've tried this thing, I don't really like it that much, and then there's something else I can do. So you've just done an Edison kind of thing. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's kind of like before it's kind of like, I have 1,000 failures and then I found like one good invention or something like that, to paraphrase. So we've already talked about what the day-to-day life of a medical student kind of looks like. There's other people, there's other YouTubers who are even closer to medical school. So, for example, there's a guy called Archer Newton. So he will talk probably about medical school a bit. There's another YouTuber from Sydney, Sebastian Puri, and so they're probably closer to what it actually is like right now, because both of those guys are medical students, so check out their stuff. But certainly I hope to give a bit of perspective on what it's like at the other end of that spectrum. And we've talked about what the day-to-day life of an actual doctor looks like. And the last question, perhaps the most important question, so I probably should put this at the start, if you were to, if I was to choose again, would I do medicine? There was a period of time in medicine where I was like, this is really hard work. And I'm feeling that sometimes it can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And I was actually feeling quite bad at one point during med school. But, fundamentally, if you're wanting to do medicine, then you've got a pretty hardcore reason for wanting to do it, whether it's sort of tied, for example, to the meaning of your existence or something like that. And if you do manage to break through that obstacle, that difficulty that you might experience, because inevitably you'll come across some failures in medical school, and inevitably you'll come across periods that are really stressful and periods that are really, really tough. But that feeling when you get to talk to someone and you can see in their eyes that they're really grateful for what you've done for them, and then you genuinely helped them in their life to live a happier life, to perhaps live a little bit longer, or you might have helped someone's family member go from sick to not sick, and that feeling of gratefulness, I think that's something that you never quite get tired of that. I think that's one of the main reasons why you should do medicine, and why medicine ultimately becomes something very satisfying. Certainly, if you've got intellectual curiosity, medicine will be very satisfying for you, because basically it's an infinite pool of knowledge that you can draw upon, and a lot of good reasons for why things are the way they are. And so from a purely intellectual perspective, if you like that sort of challenge, well, medicine is one of the ultimate challenges. So it's really, really good from that perspective. But I find that just being able to know that I made a difference in someone's life, and having that happen occasionally, makes it worth it to work hard and to keep on going for this job. So I hope that answers your question, whoever you are, whether you're Joy the commenter or anyone else that's watched this video. And if you have any other questions, feel free to leave them below in the comments, and I'll try to answer them. I mean, I have my tiny subscriber base of 33 subscribers, so hopefully that shouldn't be too arduous at the moment. But yeah, you guys take care, and I hope this video was useful. If you've come across this channel for the first time, you just gotten to this point of I know it's probably half an hour or something of just straight up rambling. But if you got into this point, press the subscribe button, and you can get more of my stuff if you haven't gotten tired of my voice already. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.